You owe a duty and an obligation to the church, qua church, and if anything happens when you're burning in hell, boy, are you going to feel bad. That kind of thing. It's just, no, it is pounded into you, and over again. And for a while, even I believed some of that stuff, and then it was like, what the hell am I thinking? So the whole idea was, we have to cover everybody up. Then. I was doing this stuff through the late 80s and early 90s. It seemed to be going along well. There were a number of coaches that had abused children. There were teachers. We had two principals, and we were allowed to go out to do this. All of a sudden, Christine Vladimiroff leaves to become the head of Second Harvest, and Sister the Blue Nun. Carol Ann Smith, and then since Quinn didn't like me and didn't want this or that, they said no, I couldn't work any longer with the schools, with the principals. That she didn't want to use that protocol. She was just at Our Lady of Good Counsel when that happened. Whatever it's called now, they changed names on everything. Their principal and the Precious Blood Fathers called me out there, and I knew the principal, and we removed him that day. School was still in, and then I called up, I think it was Rosangela at that point, the superior of the Ursulines, and I knew that one of the Ursulines had taken a sabbatical who was a principal, and I said to her, can you please send her here? And Rose said, okay. I said, we are in desperate shape, and we need a principal out here. And so Rose said, all right. So they came out to finish out the school year, and then was principal there for a couple of years to try to establish some sort of normalcy in that sort of thing. When the situation happened at St. Louis's in Cleveland Heights, and we reported him, and he went to prison, as well as Paul Dietrich from Good Counsel. In fact, I think he's still in prison. He's out? Okay. I went there and fired him, called the cops, and then all of a sudden we're left at the school without a principal. Then I called up Sister Christine Vladimiroff. I said, I need a principal. And then I said, oh, Susie Jelinek is the principal, your administrative assistant. And she said, yes. I said, guess who's the new principal at St. Louis's? And so, she was certified, she was very good and everything else. So then she stepped in for the rest of the year at St. Louis so that they would have a principal. And, during all this time, I would go to Pilla and ask him to meet with parishes? No. Ask him to meet with victims? No. Make some sort of statement? No. Was not going to do it, was not going to happen. He had absolutely no interest in any pastoral duties that, as a bishop, it was owed to the people of God. And he really, up until very recently, and then he was saying publicly that, oh no, that, he's concerned about kids and stuff. He was not. His whole issue was taking care of the priest, and first and foremost, close the troops so that nobody can get money. And if you do give them money, then they have to sign releases. Sign covenants not to give out the information so that they could stay quiet. So for a while there, because I think Bishop Quinn considered them, unworthy of him, if there were lay people involved, then, that were victimized, not perpetrators, victimized, they could come to see me. So I would meet with them, they would tell me their stories, and then I would offer them a settlement. And actually they wound up getting more money from me, because I said, here's the settlement, now you go out and you get a lawyer to review it, so they're not taking a third of your money, and I'll pay whatever the legal fee is. So we did that for several, and I only got one lawyer who was a real ass. The others were like, well, whatever, it took me a few days or whatever, and they asked for like $5,000, which I found completely reasonable. And so, we would just write it, and then we would give them their money. Well, then he didn't like that either. I shouldn't be doing that. Then, little by little, my world began to shrink. And I couldn't do this, and I couldn't do that, and I couldn't talk to this person, I couldn't talk to that person. Then they moved us into this old building that they had gotten in exchange for something like 90 acres in Concord Township. Prime building acres that a friend of mine who's a builder said they probably go between $45,000 and $90,000 an acre for a dilapidated building that cost the diocese, I don't know, that's where the headquarters, those of us who have picketed out there and we've gone, that you should see what's underneath that facade. So I was brought over there, I was put in a corner with my secretary and my administrative assistant. Any lawyer that was there could no longer work for me. They had to work for either John Wright or they had to work for Joe Smith. And that I was forbidden to speak to anybody, excuse me, who had a problem of a psychosexual nature. I said, okay. People still continue to call me because, abuse does happen, and Pat's the expert on this, not me. That 1 to 4 ratio, 1 to 5 or whatever. That's true. It really is. So if you got 1, there's more than that. And then they would, talk among themselves and stuff. I met with all the boys and their parents in the chancery and prepared them for trial because they were so embarrassed about what had gone on. And they asked me, are you our lawyer? The kids asked that, and I said, no, I'm not, but I'm here to help you. And that son of a bitch waited up until like a half an hour before the trial was to start, and the first kids were going over there because they had come to my office with their moms and dads, and we were going over there together. And I kept saying, don't be ashamed of anything. This is going to work out. You have to do this or that. And I think when we got on the floor and he realized, play day was over and it was going to be what it was going to be, he pled. He was sentenced to prison. I got into trouble over that. You're not their lawyer. You shouldn't be this. There was just nothing that I could do. But if people called me, what I would do is I would send them to therapists. And I'd pay them out of my budget. And they would get furious about that. You can't do that. And it's like, well, why not? And I mean, we had loggerheads all the time. I had several people who wanted settlements, and most of the people who wanted settlements were really, I felt so bad because they, because I would, and that's why they didn't want me to talk to them. I'd say, are you sure that's what you want? And nobody wanted, at one point, anything that was outrageous. I dealt with a father and son, and then their attorney, and their attorneys, very well-known attorneys, because his dad is very high-ranking in one of the Fortune 500 companies in the Diocese. And I feel sorry for them. I won't mention their name, but I won't mention their name. And we had mutual friends, and we had mutual friends, and I want you to, do this, can you do this, and this, and I feel like and then next day, he said, well, no, I'm in-house. He says, I'm in-house counsel, and that's what. And I said, oh, okay, fine. And I said, well, then, and all he was asking for, now this youngster tried to commit suicide 3 different times, was a cocaine addict and an alcoholic. He had been sexually abused by Marty Lewis when he was 7 years old. Now, Marty Lewis is in prison for pedophilic behavior, for doing these things to the children. This young man would not come into the chancery. I went out to the house and we talked, and it was very skittish because, I'm a man, and it took us a long time to dance around each other, till he felt that he could trust me. And then he told me So I came back and I thought, well, that's... And I told John Wright, I said, are you people stupid? I said, all the dad and the attorney wanted, I think it was like $100,500. The attorney wasn't going to take anything. It would all go to this boy, and then I said, well, to the dad, I said, we can buy an annuity, and it won't have tax ramifications for him. And with the $100,500, we'll get to like $250,000 or whatever. And because this kid was never going to be right. I mean, he wasn't. And I got ripped up one side and down the other for meeting with them, with talking to them, and I mean, they went berserk. And the Stacy White, the girl that was settled with the diocese, to Judge Gall's credit, because I know him, the diocese was being absolutely horrible. And then and our attorneys were this and that, everything else, and then Danny says, come here. So we went into to his chambers, closed the door, and we talked. And he talked to me about what he expected, and he said, I want the top for her, or we're going to go to trial. I said, it makes sense to me. And we discussed different ways of doing this, and then he told me what he wanted. I said, I can do that. He said, well, this is resolved then. And he went out there and, read the riot act to everybody and, and just handled it. But it was never cases of the diocese doing this in a caring way, in a fast way. You had to drag your feet, you had to fight, holler, cajole, threaten, bring in lawyers, lie about stuff. What was his name, that goofball? From Holy Family, Joe, I forget. He sexually abused a deacon's son when he was in Colorado. And the deacon told me, and then I said, well, we have to report that. And then I went, as a courtesy to John Wright, and I said, we have to report the priest, who, by the way, then was the head of the diaconate program for the Diocese of Cleveland, sexually abuses a deacon's son. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, he sexually abused them. It wasn't in this state. You don't have an obligation. I said, it doesn't matter what state it was in. He did the wrong thing. And he said, well, no, you got the wrong... We had a blowout over this. And I was told that basically I would be canned if I reported it to the Department of Human Services. But I did. I called up the people from DHS and Jimmy McCafferty, who was the administrator for the county for a while. I called up Jimmy and I told him, I said, I'm reporting it. Someone needs to look at it. He said, but Charlie, it didn't happen here. I said, I don't care. I want someone to know that I reported it. I reported Father Joseph Lang, who sodomized and raped a 9-year-old developmentally disabled African-American child. And they know that I did, because I was brought into Bill Mason's office when they were supposedly looking at all this stuff, and they were sitting there with a list, and they said, oh, they knew who I had reported. They knew that I had reported them. So when they're trying to fall back on, oh, we reported them, I reported them at a cost to myself. And then, as I said, I was put in this little box, a little office in the back. And then in December of 1999, they send in one of the lawyers, Barbara Lucart, I think it was, from Jones Day, who told me that the bishop had decided that this wasn't the right environment for me, and that they were going to send me out to Paynesville to work with my people. And I have a heart for the poor, which translates to, you're a dumb spick, you're going to go out and work with the Mexican Americans and, whatever hillbillies that there might be around there. And I said, do you expect me to believe that they're going to pay me my salary to go out there and sit? And I said, and how long will I be out there, before I get fired? And as many of you heard me say before, I may have been born at night, but not last night. And so I said, you know, I think you better leave. And then she got argumentative. I stood up from behind my desk. I really did. I said, either get out or I'll beat the shit out of you. And I said, if you were a man, I'd kick your ass. I said, you're a racist. Get out. I said, you tell them if they have enough balls to fire me. I'm not leaving. Fire me. And then she left. Well, nobody talked. And then in January, I started to look for another job. Because at that point is when the money stuff began to really unravel very, very quickly. And it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. They had a number of little old ladies, actually, who did all the bookkeeping and paid them half nothing. You know, they were like indentured servants, and you know, we're going to pray for you, and you know, they were all Marthas, and you know, they wanted to take care of the priest, and they worked very hard. They really did, and they were good at what they did. Well, the next thing you know, it's like, well, with Joe Smith doesn't want them there. He's going to, because he thinks he's now the president of GM, and we all know what happened there, and that they're going to third-party contract out the work. So we don't need these little old ladies who had been there for years, and then one by one they're hacking them off, and this thing is going out to his friend Anton Zagaznik, who was with Joe indicted. So, and they get into some, because I was invited to staff meetings only so they could keep an eye on me. And I went to one of the staff meetings, and there was some terrible fray with the bank that handled diocesan funds at that point. It was not National City, and it was, I don't think it was Society. It was one of the larger banks, and then they got into a tussle with Joe Smith and Anton Zagaznik, and then they said, well, we're going to pull all our money out, and the bank said, do it. We don't want your business, because the stuff that was going on was questionable and unscrupulous. So, you know, I had also told Joe at a meeting of the Secretariat that the national conference had talked about there needs to be a method for people who want to, because under the IRS, the code, if you're a 501c3 charity, anybody can come in off the streets and want to know how your money is expended, where it's going, you know, who are the top salary makers and all of that. I said we need to set up a method of doing that. And absolutely not. Well, if they had done that, they would have gotten a lot more information on what the rate of pay. Joe Smith also ran a golf outing, and the interesting thing was that the golf outing was, they had booklets, and a page then of advertisement was $10,000, and they would fill this booklet up. Except the patronages were not sold by Joe Smith. The staff was expected to do that. And then everybody had to send their secretaries from the diocese to his office to set the book up, to do all of the work. All Joe did was sit on his ass in that office. No different if he was doing work or not doing the work. And he received a very significant piece of that money for keeping. And he had wanted me at one time to go to my brother. I have an older brother, some of you know him, others don't, who is a partner at Baker Hostetler, which is a very large law firm. It's like Jones Day size. And if I needed different things, I would go to Jose, and he sent me a legal intern one summer, and he said, you know, this kid can help you. And he had been in the seminary, actually. What they really wanted, Jose told me, he says they wanted him to come back to Cleveland and to work. So he figured that if I would schmooze him, then he would come back to work to Baker, which I really didn't care, because the kid was wonderful and he helped us. He really, truly, honestly helped us. And other things that I would need, you know, Baker, they just did it. there was no, and he wanted me to sell my brother, start to sell him patronage in there, because then we could hire my brother. And I said, I don't think so. I said, no, because I am not going to be guilty of the same sin that they are. Bringing in my brother, pony up 10 grand, and then, he gets business from them. You know what I'm saying? And then it just keeps growing. As many of those people in that booklet, those were all kickbacks. The financial crisis of the diocese is not embedded in its parishes. The financial crisis of the diocese is embedded in the maladministration and the larceny downtown. That's where it stands. And so, and the use of money to settle sexual abuse cases. There was, or they said, there was a diocesan insurance policy plan or whatever. And in all the years that I was there, I would ask if I could see it, to see if there were coverages, because as I said, for many years I did all the legal work for parishes and day schools, and I was like, I don't know if this is covered, let me find out. And then I would call up, because the keeper of the policy was A.J. Quinn. And I said, okay, well, may I see it? No. Why not? You can't. I said, but is this or that covered? No, you have to ask me and then I'll let you know. So we'd have to call them up, leave information, is this covered or not covered or whatever. And generally it was. But all the parishes had to pay a certain amount of money because they were self-insured to I forget. And that fund was dissipated every single year. Well, that's because they were spending it on, not on necessarily what should have been insurance purposes. It was being spent on settling all kinds of bizarre cases, and that money kept diminishing. So the other thing is that if you read in the paper, and it is true, John Wright was the head of the financial legal office. He did have a girlfriend. He was taking money. My understanding, he was also taking property. He had her at a cushy job. She starts like at $30,000 dusting the office or something. The next thing you know, she's running the cemetery and making like $75,000 a year. Interesting. Joe Smith, his children's tuition. Now, my kids went to Catholic schools, and I paid their tuitions. The only people that came forward to help my family and I were the Benedictine Order of Cleveland. They were the only ones. Because I got stiffed by the Ursulines, by everyone. And it was the Benedictines, only the Benedictines, that helped to make sure that my boys got a Catholic education. Joe Smith's kids, the tuition and everything, were being paid by one of the insurance brokers. The other thing is the diocese purchases health insurance from one individual who sells it to the diocese at a 40 to 50% higher rate than if they went to somebody else. However, you can't go to anybody else. That's Umberto Fedeli. And when they were indicting people, they had an insurance investigation on him, and I know that because they called me up to get information. But he has so much money, power, and this is during the Republican administration. They just all backed off of him because they're all very heavy contributors. The problem in Cuyahoga County may have been through the Democratic Party, but the trouble statewide and with this scandal of the Diocese of Cleveland has Republican fingerprints all over it. People in favors that were done in Washington, people, this can go on far. I have a book this thick where I wrote the only reason Joe Smith was indicted and Anton Zagosnik is because I called up the FBI and I said, aren't you ever going to question me? And they were, why? And I said, because I was a diocesan attorney. I said, I think you would want to talk to me. And that's ultimately, do you remember, Gene, when we filed the lawsuit on trust theory to get at the we wanted the whole issue of transparency, and I can't tell you. I have them at home, and then my sister has a copy too in case anything happens to me, because they're not above that either. All these different letters I sent to the attorney's office, U.S. Attorney's Office, to prosecutor, to Bill Mason. I'm telling you, I have a whole book saying, when are you going to do something? When are you going to do something? When are you going to do something? I have copies in my possession of $875,000 of checks that were kickbacks to Joe Smith in this looting. And you cannot self-deal. I mean, there were so many laws that were broken, and their response basically was, well, it's the church's money, they can do whatever they want. And I said, it is not their money, they're merely stewards. And they went through, at one point, they fired the company that was investing diocesan money, and what I understand, Joe Smith and Anton were trading every day. Now, how stupid is that? And they lost, I don't know how many millions of dollars. Jim McCarty and Joel Retchek from the Plain Dealer had an article that was supposed to run 3 days, an expose on these financial problems, and the fact that Pilla and his family were making significant dollars on the backs of the people of the diocese, and their boss at that time, Machaski, killed the story. Because he and Pilla, his great protectors have been Machaski, Sam Miller, Fideli. There's a whole group of them, and this was not done, like Blanche Dubois, depend upon the kindness of strangers. It was more than just the kindness of strangers. There was a quid pro quo throughout this whole thing. But if you look at that, you realize the diocese then is underfunded by millions of dollars, not because the parishes were all out there, lighting their cigars with $50 bills and doing all kind of wild and crazy things. And the heaviest expense for any parish, other than the salary of the teachers if they have a day school, okay, is going to be the health insurance. Okay? And you're buying health insurance from your Goomba for 30, 40, 50% higher. And the reason I know that is because one of the religious schools, the principal took me out and told me. And that Joe Smith tried to strong-arm him, and that, in fact, he was told, Pilla really, really wants you to do this. They were all involved in this thing. So, if all of a sudden, Pilla appears as this, poor little waif that, I was just a pastor. He was a micromanager. If you sneezed, he knew about it. I wrote a letter one time in defense of a Catholic school principal because of something that happened, and I wrote it to the mayor's wife of Seven Hills, and he sent me, I have it in my office, in my house, the nastiest letter. How dare me write a letter like that, and then I called him back and said, hey, the kid made this remark, his wife is saying that she's a lesbian, that she's this, that she's that. I said, whatever she is none of their goddamn business. And they have no business out in public saying those kinds of things. And I said, if he screamed ouch, it's because it hurts. Don't you ever write a letter to anybody again. So I sat there, and then on February the 19th, 2000, I had a stroke. And my secretary put me in, they said, let's call St. Vincent's Charity Hospital. And I said, no. No. I said, can you girls get me out? And I said, yeah. I said, take me in my car. Take me to Hillcrest. And they were like, well, anything could happen, I said, I don't care. I said, but I'm not going to give Tony Pilla the satisfaction, or John Wright, or Joe Smith, to be carried out feet first. Help me down. And they did. And I went, and I did have a stroke. I was in intensive care. I was in the hospital for like 8 or 9 days. No one called my wife up to see if I was dead or alive. No one came to help her. Nothing. The only ones who came were the Benedictines. They sent a priest as soon as they found out. They sent a priest, and then our parish, Father Tom Sweeney sent out the associate, and so. But every single day, a couple of the couples would come to the hospital to see, because I was in pretty bad shape, and then they would bring food, because they had that deli, and they would deli to my wife and my kids, because my wife was in the hospital all the time. And my oldest son was a senior Benedictine then, and I'll never forget it. Is probably the two things with the boys. He crawled into bed with me. He put his head here, and then he says, "If you die, we'll all die." He said, "Because Mommy will lose her mind." That's how much you care for each other. And then my other son, they wanted to send him from Benedictine, when he was a senior, to some program in Washington, D.C. I tried to get a job. They stopped I had some places where I went an interview like 3 and 4 times. One of them was the Office of Education for the federal government for the state of Ohio. And even though it was a Republican administration, there was no Latino throughout the United States that had that position. But I had done school law for almost 20 years. So it's like, I'm qualified to do this. And everything was going along fine. And then one day, because they brought people in from Washington, were asking if I would go to Washington. I said, fine. They came in and just said to me, no, we want to know if we can contact your former boss, and then we'll let you know. And then I just said, well, I said, be men about this. I said, somebody got to you. You're not going to give me the job. I have the cojones to just tell me, you ain't going to get the job, and I'll go on my way. I really don't care. I was supposed to be named a Cleveland Municipal Court judge. And Pilla went to, I don't know this for 100% sure, so I'm not going to say it, one of his big fat Paisan friends, and you can guess the rest there, who went then to the Republican Party and said that they wouldn't appoint me because I wouldn't become a Republican, and that, well, it wouldn't be a good choice. Well, no, the issue was who I am, and they weren't going to do that. I was being punished, and I've lost clients. I went to work for Gallagher Sharp. The parishes wanted to come with me, and they would pay me a stipend every month, and then I would take care of their school and their parishes. Joe Smith sent out a letter saying that anybody who hired outside, it didn't directly say me, but it meant me, would not have any insurance coverage and would lose everything. I worked at Gallagher Sharp for a couple of years. They were wonderful. It just wasn't, not what I wanted to do, the corporate stuff. And then we had a son who got very, very sick. And my wife and I went through my whole retirement, like $250,000 to make sure that we had him in hospitals and we had all of this. And so, when people say, are you resentful against the diocese? Yes, I am. Because I was the only person who did the right thing. And now I have so many damn health problems and I don't have any retirement. So I guess I have to work to the day I die. I don't know. And I was telling somebody, I've been in Hillcrest Hospital, counting the time on Tuesday, I've been there 17 times in 10 years. For strokes, mild heart attack, back problems, migraines, It is very difficult. at my age to be running from, and then I feel bad because, see, I told you that kindergarten to college really makes you very neurotic. And so I represent all kinds of people. Most of them don't pay me, and then or I make them sign contracts, and they know that I'm not going to go after them for the money. So it's just I don't know. And then people ask me if I still am Catholic. Yes, I am. I go to Mass every Sunday. My wife most Sunday. My children do not. My children do not. They are. My daughter's going to be married at St. Patrick's, and the reason she's doing that is it won't make me happy. And that's where her grandparents were buried. That's the only reason. They have a lot of anger. I lost my house, my cars. I don't know how many thousands of dollars in health, and they just see me coming at, they should name a wing after me at Hillcrest. They're so but the misnomer again is that that these parishes were being closed because somehow the only, and Emmerich's was not one, Wendelin's was not another one. There were parishes that owed assessments, which is basically a tax to the church. I mean, that's like owing yourself money, and if they owed anything, all right. But these churches were solvent and paid all their assessments. However, they were old ethnic churches. They had money in the bank, and if you suppress a parish, you get the money. If you combine the parish, meaning the diocese, you combine the parish, the money then goes to the successor parish. So, do you think it was a coincidence that Wendelin's is closed, that Emmerich's is closed, the other Hungarian parishes in Akron are closed? They're closed. Where does the money go? Gee whiz, downtown. And not $1 or $2. You can speak better to that. It is millions for the money that was looted and the funds that were looted by a group of people, and some of them are still there. And I wrote to Bishop Lennon and said, you may know who I am by inference, but I'm just telling you, if you really want to be a good steward, contact me. I said, because you still have employees who participated in the thievery. 6 months later, I got a letter saying he was going to pray for me or something. Right. I don't need his prayers.